our mission, because we are also a major health organization. We've worked so well with WHO, with UNICEF, with UNRWA, with WFP, and we have been coordinating our mission. And as the major local actor, we are responsible for evacuating the medical evacuees from the hospitals to Rafah. We were accompanied by UN, OCHA, and others, and WHO to take assistance to the north, because again, we were also on top of what we do. We were given the huge burden of being responsible, the national Palestinian entity responsible for receiving the aid through Rafah and distributing it to the different actors. And we were collaborating with UNRWA on this. So I think there is no question that our colleagues, you know, I'll give just one anecdote. Those people, we have 30 volunteers in Jabalia, staff and volunteers. Nobody told them to stay. Nobody told them from management to go from the destroyed clinic, PRCS clinic, to UNRWA school or clinic, or to the Baptist hospital. They themselves took the initiative, they looked at the situation, and they acted accordingly out of this humanitarian duty to serve and to remain with their people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Natalie Buckley now from UNRWA. You visited Gaza a couple of weeks ago, but I want to broaden it slightly as well. So how can we better work with local and international partners to improve humanitarian access to Gaza?
Thank you very much, Anya. Indeed, what I might want to do is give my impressions of Gaza, because I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I think that's useful context to then broaden and answer your question. What really struck me there is the extent, the scale, and the consequences of the mass displacement. I mean, Gaza is 2.1 million. It's roughly the population of Brussels and greater area. You've got 1.7 million people displaced, 1.4 million in Rafah, which is a town which accommodated 280,000 people, not more, before, and 1 million of which are in UNRWA facilities. And so beyond, you know, people talked about the fear, the hunger, the insecurity, but what I saw as well, and what I haven't heard so far here, and I want to put it here on the stage, is the unfolding health and sanitation and environmental crisis that is also unfolding or happening in Gaza today. I've seen people, women in particular, who bear the brunt of the crisis, live in squalid conditions. There's an offensive smell in Rafah along the sea because there's no sewage system anymore. It's open sewage, there's no solid waste collection. People are basically stacked on top of each other, living in undignified conditions. And that for women is also paying a heavy price, no privacy, no dignity for anybody. Really. So I visited shelters. On average, it's 30,000 people in each shelter, which UNRWA is hosting. I was unable to move around the shelter. It was just so packed. And people had, obviously, demands, you know, hunger, you know, food, medicine. There's, on average, 5,500 people for one shower, 888 people for one toilet. So how can you live in these conditions? It's very difficult. I also visited the East Rafah Distribution Center, which used to work very well. It's a flower distribution center of UNRWA, and it was hit only 3-4 days ago. So talking about the toll that this is taking, UNRWA has already lost 168 staff members. 3,500 staff members are still working every day. And it is what you are saying, Marwan. They get up every day, they're displaced themselves, their families have been injured or lost, they've lost family members, but they still come to work. There's a general breakdown of law and order. This was talked about as well. And very, very difficult, if not impossible, to go to the north. And there's another concept that I haven't heard here, or I've heard it just mentioned by one minister. It's leaving no one behind. This is a key goal of the UN, and I don't think we're able to actually leave no one behind in Gaza at the moment. So against that context, now let me get to your question. And as I said, UNRWA really remains the backbone of the humanitarian operations in Gaza. It contributes all of its assets in support of other partners on the ground, from the reception to the storage to the distribution of aid, the tracking, the reporting, the logistics, the fuel, the vehicles, the accommodation, and the coordination with the Israeli authorities, of course. The CLA and COGAT is done by UNRWA. And the response is really centered around the UNRWA shelters or the vicinity of these shelters. We already have excellent partnerships, I have to say, with colleagues from the UN. UNICEF is here. Over 53,000 children are vaccinated since January. It's also thanks to UNICEF and the vaccines, and the vaccinations are taking place in UNRWA health centers, because we still have 7 health centers operating, including in Rafah, 2 of them. WHO, of course, I should mention, WFP for the food, IOM for the shelters. We have these partnerships in place, including also with the World Central Kitchen that has made the news recently, and for their community kitchen, we work with them, and UNOPS for the fuel. Now, how do we work better? Well, we would scale up and we would have much larger and bigger partnership if the environment for us to have more food coming into Gaza, more aid coming into Gaza, and then be able to distribute it, if that environment was enabled. At the moment, it is very difficult to operate. So there are constraints. It takes, I went to the crossing and I saw myself, I jumped on the blue line and I saw what you describe, which is aid is just there. We call it sleeping aid in Gaza. But the trickle, I think on average, is it 99 trucks that are coming in a day, is a trickle of aid. So all the constraints around getting the aid in need to be eased. We need to have more stable communication, internet, all of this has broken down. There's no electricity in Gaza, and more crossing points. If crossing points were open, then we would be able to have more aid. With more aid coming in, then if there was a ceasefire and if the enabling environment, more security within Gaza was also assured, then we would be able to do more together with our partners. We would call also on international media to be allowed access into Gaza, respect for international humanitarian law, but I think the minister is going to talk about it. Private sector resumption, and predictable funding for all, and of course the release of hostages. I mean, this is something that everybody wants as well.
Talk about, just interesting, I want to pick up that thing about private sector. I mean, those are the local actors. What is the impact on the people that are working with you, that private sector?
What is the impact of?
On the private sector, those local actors.
Before the war, there were about 500 trucks that used to come into Gaza, and they are mostly private sector, mostly commercial goods. This has completely broken down, obviously, today. It's aid that comes in. How long is this population going to rely on aid? The commercial sector needs to kick up again, like small shops. I'm not talking, stores, just to try. But the conditions are not there because it's so insecure. How do you actually even launch a humanitarian operation under constant bombardment?
So it's everything you say is sort of provokes more questions. It's a sort of circular, incredibly frustrating. But I just wanted to ask you another question about UNRWA. We've heard that some countries, including Australia, Canada, and Sweden, have now resumed funding. But what impact has the funding freeze had on you?
Yes, thank you. And we thank all the countries that resumed and the countries that never left us and continue to support us and even scaled up actually their pledges. And we heard from Spain, Portugal, Malta, Slovenia, and Ireland. So thank you. We still have 13 countries, though, who have not made a decision as to whether to resume or not. And the impact of that is $365 million that we are unable to account for. Now, the current state of affairs will be okay doing our operations until the end of April, perhaps beginning of May. But how do you plan? I mean, we shouldn't be placed in this situation today when there's a humanitarian crisis unfolding. And so, it has impact on our procurement, it has impact on staff morale, it has impact on our planning, on the pipeline. So we really call on the resumption of funding. But it's not only in Gaza. The impact of the freezes or pauses or suspension is felt and will be felt if countries do not resume across the region in all the 5 fields of operations where we operate, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan. And this is affecting primarily, and I come back to it, the health situation. We have hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees, whether in Jordan, in Syria or Lebanon, who will not be able to access the health facilities. In Jordan, it's also 100,000 children who may not be able to go to an UNRWA school. So it has a wider impact than just Gaza.
Thank you very much. And anyway, as you said, you are responsible, UNRWA, you're the backbone. So without the backbone,
yes.
yeah.
We've got 13,000 staff on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring in Minister Caroline Genet now. I want to take it a step further now, sort of move the conversation on not just to the impact on the ground and hearing sort of first-hand accounts. In January, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to enable the provision of basic services and humanitarian assistance. And the Belgian Prime Minister is reported to have said, tactics of starvation are inadmissible. So how can we ensure an adherence to international human law by all parties in the conflict?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to pay tribute to my 3 colleagues here because, as you rightly stated, the true heroes, they are on the ground. And I think it's important that they are not just numbers. It's not only 32,000 people killed, it's families, it's not only famine or starvation as a weapon of war, it's about international humanitarian principles, and we have to adhere to these principles as international community. And for me, as a Belgian minister and being in the presidence of the European Council, I think it's so important that when we say that we are in support of international law, that we say that a child that is killed by a Russian mine in the Donbass is as important as a child being starved in Gaza. And we should apply the same rules. If not, we lose our credibility and our adherence to the international humanitarian principles. Also, in a war, there are rules. And that's why it's so important that the ICG provisional measures are respected. It wasn't nothing. We have to prevent commonly a genocide. We have to make sure that humanitarian aid is accessible, that it reaches the people in need. And it's the highest international court that judged so. So when you look into the situation on the ground, you can only be depressed because humanitarian aid has not been stepped up since the ruling of the ICG. It has been stepped down even. When we say we need 500 trucks each day and we see only 98 coming in, well, we're not matching the expectations. When we have to rely on airdrops or sea corridors while trucks are piling up at the border, we are leaving people behind. And Belgium will intervene in the ICJ court proceeding, and I think it's important that we do so. We don't take sides. We're just in support of humans, people who are victims of extremist regimes. Hamas being a terrorist organization attacking innocent civilians, partying, sleeping, but also an Israeli government influenced by extreme right-wing ministers not respecting anything of what we abide by as international community. And it's innocent civilians who are the victims. So I think when we want to have international law respected, all of our countries, all of our governments should intervene because we have to prevent the genocide and we have to prevent starvation. And that's why the Belgian government decided to do so. Of course, we have to call for a ceasefire. If not, it will only worsen and worsen and worsen, only more innocent victims and only more hatred and grudge will be installed for generations. Third thing, accountability. And then we come back to international law. I think we need more transparency on the ground. It's not only humanitarian workers who are targeted, and my condolences to all the families and to the organizations and the staff that has been killed, but it's also journalists. There is no respect for transparency in this situation. And I know in every war, the truth is one of the first victims, but this situation is a propaganda war as well. And we should stay with the facts, we should overcome what the propaganda that has been waged by the two parties. But about accountability, Belgium was one of the first countries as well to pledge another 5 million euros to the ICC. I think it's important that proceedings are prepared and that accountability can come to the forefront once that more access is secured. I'd like to underline as well that more humanitarian access, of course, is needed, and there are so many border crossings that still are totally closed. So we have Eres in the north. Please open it up. 400,000 people are in risk of starvation, famine. And there is a border crossing just where these people are stuck. We have a port, the port of Ashdod. A lot of humanitarian aid is stuck. So please allow more humanitarian goods to come in. And what can we do? I think we can be principled as international community, and we have to speak with one voice. And as far as we are concerned, also in the European Union, we speak not so much with one voice. We could do better, and we are improving, but still, I think we have to be principled. If not, we will be accused of using double standards.
With Belgium as the presidency at the moment, sitting at the presidency of the Council, can you exert any influence to try and encourage your fellow EU
I think it's
countries?
important that we take principled positions. What's wrong by promoting international law, international humanitarian law, by stating the facts as they are, by talking to both sides, but in a principled manner, in accordance to international law? And I think we should bring all measures to the table. Political measures, of course, we need negotiations on a two-state solution. And if I'm concerned, I think when we talk about a two-state solution, well, we've recognized the state of Israel, it's there. I think we have to recognize the state of Palestine as well. On the other hand, we have to be principled. We have relations with Israel as well. We have an association agreement. We have an Article 2 in the agreement that states, well, if one of the parties, Europe or Israel, intend not to respect the human rights clause, maybe we should go into it. Maybe we should review that. And maybe that's something the European Commission can do. And it is on the table of the Foreign Affairs Council ongoing at this moment. So I think the whole range of political, diplomatic measures should be under scrutiny, because this violence must stop.
Thank you very much for that. So I'd like to move on now to Ted Chaibund, thank you. And you're overseeing UNICEF's operation in Gaza. We heard from Natalie about the impact on women, but we know that 70% of the 31,000 people killed are women and children. But from a UNICEF point of view, what is the impact of the delays in humanitarian aid on children?
Thank you, Anya. And Thank you for having us here. The delay of humanitarian assistance on children and that impact is nothing short of horrendous. You mentioned the overall numbers of people killed. Of that number, 13,450, over 13,450 children have been reportedly killed. That's an unprecedented number, which is a stain on our consciousness and a stain on our humanity. 33 Israeli children have also died. 13,450 Palestinian children, 33 Israeli children. And now what we're seeing is children dying of malnutrition and dehydration, which is a slow, painful death where your organs shut down. We know of 23 children in the north of the Gaza Strip, according to reports that we've received from hospitals that have died due to malnutrition and dehydration. And that would be the tip of the iceberg. Those are the children who actually got to the hospital, not the children who have died silently at home or in communities when they didn't get to the hospital. And this just goes to show what lack of access, what insufficient humanitarian assistance leads to. UNICEF did a survey of malnutrition levels in Gaza. As you referenced, the IPC report will be out in 12 minutes. And that survey showed that we have 31% of the children in the north of Gaza, or 1 in every 3 children that's acutely malnourished. That's up from 15% in January, which shows you how quickly the situation is deteriorating. And if you don't treat the child that's acutely malnourished, they basically have a 40% chance of dying. And as I said, it's a painful, slow death. So we now have the reality of death due to bombing, death due to shelling, now being compounded by death due to hunger, death due to malnutrition, death due to disease.
What are you hearing about what they are actually eating? Is it just they're not eating, or are they eating stuff which doesn't give them any nutrition?
So 100% of the population of the population in Gaza is not eating enough. And that's particularly acute in the north of the Strip, where, again, there's been barriers to access. And then there's the issues around the types of food and the variety of food that is available. But the point I want to make is, while you have a 31% rate of acute malnutrition in the north of the Strip, it's at 8%, which is high, but manageable and below the threshold level on the border with Rafah. Because there you've got better access to humanitarian assistance and some commercial trucks. And that just goes to show that this is something that can be addressed if access is opened up, if the conditions for humanitarian and commercial traffic into the Strip are allowed to happen. And it goes to show that you can make a difference. Organizations like the international NGOs, Palestinian Red Crescent Society, UNRWA, UNICEF, WHO, WFP, we're on the ground. We've got 35 colleagues from UNICEF on the ground currently who are working on these issues, trying to get the assistance in, and it must be allowed to go in.
And okay, it must be allowed to go in, so let me just put you on the spot. What do you think should be done to allow them to go in?
I mean, firstly, and let me just join Faris, Marwan, Nathalie, and the minister in basically summarizing what they've said. I mean, firstly is a ceasefire. An attack on Rafah would have consequences beyond the manageable. I mean, we're talking about 13,450 Palestinian children killed as of now. I don't want to contemplate what it looks like, an attack on Rafah. And make it part, it has to be part of a deal where hostages come home too. There's 2 children, 1 in 4 who are still being held hostage, they need to be home with their families as well. That's all part of an arrangement around the ceasefire. Second is access through more points. Minister Jeunesse mentioned Eretz, Carney needs to be opened up, and you need to have access to commercial trucks. As Natalie said, there were 500 trucks before the war started on 7th of October. We've had an average of between 98 and 110 since then. That's 20% of what's needed to sustain the population. And there's absolutely no reason why commercial trucks can't be part of the equation. Third is to stop delaying the entry of so-called dual-use supplies into the Strip. We've had PVC water pipes to repair water systems that took 4 months to come in. And we still can't get the water taps, the small metal bends to be able to connect water systems so that people can have access to drinking water, which we take for granted every day. And then lastly, as you've pointed out, and others have pointed out, sea and air access are welcome, but they're not a substitute for road access. There needs to be use of the border road so that we can get into the north of the Strip. There needs to be faster inspections at both Rafah and Kerem Shalom so that the population can get the support it needs. This is a deliberate squeezing of humanitarian space in a manner that in my career, and I've been around a long time, I've almost never seen.
Right, well, I'm just going to start taking some questions now because I can see some questions coming in which are pertinent to some of the comments you've just made just now, Ted. And there's one that's come in, which is, will airdrops and maritime route address the famine and malnutrition? You've said road is best, but surely this is going to help. Ted.
I mean, look, every route should be used. But the bottom line is the first shipment that came in by sea will be able to be the equivalent of 12 to 13 trucks. There are hundreds of trucks waiting on the border in Egypt as we speak. UNICEF has 2 months' worth of high-energy biscuits and ready-to-use therapeutic foods that can basically sustain 50% of the population, supplementing the food aid that WFP, World Central Kitchen, UNRWA, Palestinian Red Crescent, and others provide. It's not an either-or situation. It's an and situation. We also have to be careful that all the attention on air and sea diverts attention from the essential use of roads. So people who then are focusing on that are not there available to clear trucks, to be able to move things in. Road is the main strategy that needs to be pursued, and there's no reason why it's not being opened up for access. That's a choice that's being made.
Thank you. I can see you nodding, Natalie. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you. In addition, I'd say airdrops are extremely costly. There are huge logistical challenges as well. You don't know where exactly they are being dropped and who collects it. And for the maritime as well, security challenges. So the food that has arrived, I believe, remained to be distributed throughout Gaza. So it's not an or, it's an and situation, exactly what Ted was saying. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. I absolutely agree on this, what they called alternative. Quite honestly, I want to say I want to be undiplomatic and say they are not even welcome. For one reason, I'm a Palestinian. I travel in the region. I hear what people are saying. There are huge rumors about the sea route in Jordan and in Palestine, especially. These rumors are saying they are building the port in order to force people to leave Gaza. And of course, we work within communities. The trust of our communities The understanding of what we do is important for us to continue our mission. So there are also risks beyond even this PR, what I call PR stunt, because we all know it is very ineffective. The other thing which I have highlighted in almost all my meetings, especially with high officials, with the UN, is everybody is talking about the route from Egypt and from Jordan. Of course, besides using the normal ports which Palestinians have access. We don't control borders, we don't control ports. The ports and borders are controlled by Israel around us, from not only in Gaza, but also West Bank. So there are Palestinian business people. Gaza used to be a very significant market for factories, for business in the West Bank. If you can transfer aid from Jordan to Gaza, the West Bank is only 1 hour away from Gaza. And today's situation in the West Bank is quite explosive. There is even hunger in the West Bank. 150,000 workers, laborers who work in Israel no longer since 7th of October can work, can bring in income to their families, can bring food on the table and generate the economy in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority cannot pay the salaries of their staff because Israel withholds all the tax money that it collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. There is a very serious economic and social situation in the West Bank that is really a concern for everybody that is going to explode. So using even the West Bank, we are ready to transport thousands, and business people, we have met with business people in the West Bank. They are ready to help and they are ready to contribute. Hundreds of trucks would go every day from the West Bank to Gaza in 1 hour. They will be there in 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come in.
First of all, of course, I agree with all what has been said, but just to add to it as well, from an INGO perspective, in addition to the fact that we need to open all borders, it's not about selection. I think it has to be pumped in, but also again from a humanitarian actor perspective, we were surprised by the fact that the discourse moved suddenly from an aid diversion discourse where most of our donors even refused to discuss a no-regret policy for distribution and were warning us about aid diversion, and those same donors ended up dropping aid from the sky without any measures. Is it kosher for some and not for the rest? Aid has to be delivered to everyone, everywhere, and to those who mostly need it without any further delays. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in some questions from the floor. We have some on Slido, which are great, but if anyone has posted something on Slido and actually wants to ask it, I think we have a roving mic. So put your hand up if you want to ask a question. I will invite you. Yes. Could you give me your name and your organization as well, please?
Hi, I'm Vincent Steely. I'm the Operations Director for Action Against Hunger. I was in Gaza 2 weeks ago, and I've been following up Gaza for 16 years with all the different conflicts that happened during the years, and I can tell you, what you see, it's very dire and it's really alarming, as you mentioned. Now, I wanted to ask something because actually some are talking about a 1-month ceasefire, which for sure will not be enough to solve the malnutrition problem because it's a longer process. It's also a way you could stabilize a little bit the situation, but if immediately afterwards it will fall down again and goes into the same problematic. Now, the IPC report that will be published today is alarming and it's shocking, the numbers. But in case we have 1-month ceasefire, what would be the priority? How to prioritize items coming in, or how to prioritize the activities that are most needed? This would be the question for me.
Thank you. Good question. So who would like to start? That's such a huge problem. How do you prioritize? What would you do with that 1 month?
Yes, I think already there are so many contingency plans with the UN, with the clusters, etc. You are all familiar with that. But also look at the experience of the last pause in the fighting in December. There was supposed to be convoys going every day from Rafah to the north. We were responsible of taking those trucks to the north. We couldn't get even those trucks every day to the north. The first day, I think we got about 100, 150 trucks. The next day, 50. And then a couple of days, we stopped. Because there is a checkpoint in the middle of Gaza that dissects Gaza between south and north. South of Wadi Gaza, north of Wadi Gaza, people are not allowed to go. Anybody who tries to cross will be killed and targeted. Aid, as I said, our colleagues were targeted and detained while they were accompanying those trucks going from the south to the north. So the situation will be difficult. Nevertheless, I think the priorities are clear. We need to get aid to those most needed, as far as said, in the north. Remember, those people have not had, we're talking about 100 trucks average a day since, during those past 5 months, but the north only got, I think, 2 or 3 times we got access to the north to get aid during those 5 months. They are really starving. They are in need of aid. So we really need to guarantee that aid will go to the north. That's one. 2, we need to, and as PRCS, we are looking at the health sector as a priority. This is a priority. People everywhere and in the north are dying because of lack of medicine. Chronic diseases are not treated. Elderly people who could not move are also dying because of lack of health care, apart from those injured, those under the rubble, etc., etc. So we are setting up what we call advanced medical points across the whole of Gaza, including in the north of Gaza. We have asked the UN, we have asked the Egyptians, we have asked ICRC all to be able to have access to our hospital, which is still besieged in the north, in Gaza City, Al-Quds Hospital, to make it as a center for health facilities in the north of Gaza. And the third, I'm sorry, I will not take also from my colleagues, but the third priority is to establish additional shelters so those people who are in the streets can find a kind of a tent, a cover on their heads to shelter. And we are setting up 5 additional camps. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to set up in the north. So what we've been told, we should set up those camps again in the south of Wadi Gaza. So we're trying to do that in the middle area in Deir al-Balah.
Thank you. Natalie.
I may add, what would also help is to have, and Ted mentioned it, clarity on the dual-use items. So many items that there is no established list of what items are prohibited or restricted. We've seen in the Al Arish warehouse items such as crutches being turned back because of the metal, wooden boxes for children, scissors for children, part of a play, games for children. We've seen the chlorine, generators, ventilators, so that goes to your point about health. There is no clarity on exactly what items are prohibited or not, and if there was a ceasefire, it would really be helpful to have that in terms of prioritization as well.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm going to just bring in a quick headline here. This is reverting back to my days as a news presenter. So I understand that the sort of main headline, the top headline, and possibly Ted knows much more, is that this IPC report we've just been hearing about, it has found catastrophic hunger and unfolding famine for 70% of Gazans in the north, and catastrophic food insecurity conditions for 50% of Gazans in the center-southern governorates. So, Ted, can you expand on that? What's your reaction to that?
Yes, I mean, the report has just been issued 6 minutes ago, and as you indicate, the situation in Gaza is catastrophic. Famine is imminent in the northern governorate, and there is a risk of famine across the rest of the Gaza Strip. The latest APC findings show that famine is projected to occur anytime between now and May 2024. That's how they work. It's a projection of an outcome. And indeed, this is very much in line with the acute malnutrition figures that I spoke to earlier. I mean, this is a society that before October 7th had levels of acute malnutrition that were in the less than 1% in terms of the coverage. And this is where we've come to. So it's a horrendous situation. It needs to be reversed. The consequences for children and their families are intergenerational. If we don't act now, if this is not addressed throughout the whole Gaza Strip. As Marwan has said in terms of the question on priority, we absolutely need access to the whole of the Gaza Strip without restrictions, more access points. The priorities are food aid, nutritional supplements, sanitation and hygiene kits, access to safe drinking water, so that includes those pipes and those fittings to be able to repair systems so that you can drink clean water and not get diarrhea or hepatitis A when you're trying to survive.
So is it just access? There's a question here from Dina. What's needed to restore nutritional programs to prevent further child mortality? Is the answer access, or is there more than that?
It begins with access, and a response to nutrition has to be multi-sectoral. So it's not just food. It's food, it's the nutritional supplement, it's hygiene. 1.2 million people living on top of each other on the border, when we can't bring in portable toilets, means that hygiene conditions are deteriorating. It's respect of civilian space. So hospitals, health centers need to be able to function and treat those that need treatment. All of those factors need to come in to address malnutrition.
Thank you. I'll just take another question. I'd like to ask Minister Genet. It's about the famine. You're not here to represent the EU, but what can the EU do?
Well, I think there's two things we can do. First of all, call for more humanitarian access, as we have been doing from day one. Second, I think we no longer only have to plead for a humanitarian pause. We need a ceasefire that's permanent. I think that is the only solution to make sure that you can build up Palestinian society. And that starts with feeding people, with taking care of people, mental health. It's the whole package I think we should invest in. And I think we have to make sure that whatever we do, that it reaches those who are most in need. And it isn't happening because convoys are attacked or there's pillaring going on. So the safety, the security for people who we want to reach is not there as well. So I think the only solution is humanitarian and political, but that means that we need an end of the violence first.
So while you have the floor, I'm going to ask you another question that's come in here from Luca. And it says, all speakers agree that access remains the key facilitator to any betterment, yet there's absolutely no sign of involved parties to facilitate access to basic needs. How do we create an actual impact? How to increase pressure on Israel's government?
Whatever it takes, I would say. But we stay in the framework of international law, of course. We can ask it friendly, but so far we didn't succeed the way we wanted to. We can discuss the whole judicial instrumentarium that is there. I personally don't have any taboos. whatever works to stop the violence. Of course, negotiations should be there, but at one point in time, when you need a visa ban, for instance, towards violent settlers, why not? At one time, when you have to discuss sanctions towards the Israeli government, you have to be courageous enough to bring them to the table, whatever works within the framework of international law.
Thank you. I'm just going to take two questions. There's a gentleman here and the one behind him. We'll take both questions, please, one after the other. And if you can give me your name and title. Thank you.
My name is Mansoor Ahmed. I'm a volunteer. Have been serving for 18 years with voluntary services and we awarded various national and international awards. Thank you for the discussions. This discussion is much, topic is much discussed. I just, with regard to your violation of international law, I just need to ask, with regard to violation of international law, what is the best way to ensure absolute justice, if you kindly say? Because this issue is completely related with the problem. Thank you.
So before you answer, I'll just take another question, and then you could perhaps think about your answer. So just behind you, there was a question. Thanks.
Hi. Nicholas No, a senior fellow at Refugees International. Marwan, if you can just deepen perhaps this suspicion and fear amongst Palestinians and others about the port construction off of Gaza, the potential maybe for, like we've seen over many decades, the forced displacement of more Palestinians. What exactly is the concern there? And then if the concern is that this could possibly be a way to encourage or smooth the forced sort of displacement of people from Gaza, Egypt, of course, is closed. Israel won't let them in. I'd like to ask the minister from Belgium, what would the European position be if suddenly there is massive, even beyond the catastrophic hunger, there is a decision, people are starving, they're dying, they're being bombed, perhaps they should leave on boats via this port. I wonder what the European position would be, but please, Marwan, first, exactly the contours of this story. Perhaps I have the suspicion wrong.
All right, so let's take that question first, and then we will go to the minister. So for Marwan, is there any evidence to this suspicion? Is it a conspiracy theory? What do you think?
Well, it's very difficult to provide evidence on conspiracy theories, so, but they are abundant. The Middle East is so full. But I'll tell you how I came across it. So I crossed from West Bank to Jordan. My sister lives in Jordan. She's a very old lady. Not so old, but... and so she's not a politician, she's not, but she's carried it. So she first asked me this question. Said, so they are building this port with the Americans, et cetera, so that they will, the ships will come and they will board people out of Gaza, as every Palestinian is believed this is the ultimate goal of the Israel war in Gaza. You understand, those who know the Palestine question, our biggest fear is what we call the Nakba. I am a son of a refugee family who were forced out of Ramle in 1948. I was born in Jordan, my family, and we live with this Nakba every day in and every day. So I looked then at the social media and I saw many posts which are talking about this rumor. So it is gathering some traction within the social media, and it is. So I'm not really sure. Of course, you cannot really explain or say about conspiracy theories this way or the other way, but that is the fear among the people, as has been the fear all the way along this, during the past 5 months with regard to people forced out to Egypt. And of course, with your family, when you have fear for your children, every day, you don't know whether you will wake up alive, whether your family, of course, if there is any route to get out, you will try to protect your family and get out. So it might be far from reality, but you never know again. But it is a rumor that is getting traction within the society. We, as a Palestinian organization, as a Red Crescent, working with our communities, are very careful. We have, without naming, because we have previous wars where also people came in, countries, aid agencies, and they were caught with suspicious activities. In 2014, we have a famous case, 2007 and 8 and 9 as well. We refuse even to get aid from those people because we don't want to be labeled by our community, our people, as we are complicit in any sort of rumor or attempt that would break the trust between us and our people.
Thank you very much, Marwan. I'd like to bring Minister Genet in to answer that. I think the question was, would the EU facilitate the evacuation of people through that way? And also the other question about the history to international law.
Yeah, of course we help with evacuation. We got our citizens out. We are asking to get, for instance, from the Belgian perspective, to get out the people who work for the Belgian corporation. But we need security vettings by the Israelis, by the Egyptians, and that's the first thing we can do, and we have to wait for. But more important is that we make Israel abide by the provisional measures of the ICJ. We have to prevent genocide. We have to make sure that we prevent ethnic cleansing. We have to make sure that we prevent resettlement. So we should also be very careful on evacuating too many people, because it might be the purpose of what this Israeli government wants, or some settler movements certainly want. So we have to make sure, and we have to have them heard, that Gaza is an entire part of the future Palestinian state, and people have the right to live where they were born. So we have to make sure that we don't play a cynical game that that serves the agenda of the settler movement. So that would be the first thing. And I think prevent famine, it always comes back to the same issue: more humanitarian access and an end to the hostilities.
Right, and on the humanitarian law question, you really seem to think it holds the answer. You have a lot of faith in it. My microphone's gone. Yeah, you can hear me now. So you have a lot of faith in humanitarian law, but I think the question is, what is the record of it being, international law rather, what is the record of it being successful, having good outcomes? Caroline.
Well, we've seen breaches of international law on a daily basis now, and what is really at stake is the credibility of international order. And I think we should be well aware of that. Being a Minister of Development Cooperation, I talk a lot with also African partners, and they also see what Europe, for instance, is doing in the Ukraine or in Gaza or in some parts of Africa. And that's not always the same. So we should be very well aware of that if we want to keep international order at the forefront of everything what we do. And I think we should. That's the only offer we have for a world in peace and security. It is international law, and we have to make it respected. And ICJ, ICC, all procedures are there. But the first thing is political solutions.
Right, we've got 10 minutes left. I want to take a couple of questions. There's one that's only had one vote, but I think it's a very important question. As the moderator, I've spotted it. Persons with disabilities are among those most at risk in any humanitarian crisis. So what data do we have on their situation in Gaza, and what's being done to ensure that aid is accessible to everyone? Who would like to answer that? Three of you. Well, maybe 1 minute each. Just please, we've got 10 minutes.
Let me make two quick points. One is we had data on disabilities before October 7th, and UNICEF, working with the Ministry of Social Welfare in Ramallah and other partners, has been able to use cash as an intervention, even during this conflict, electronic cash, to try to reach families with disabilities who can then try to buy what's on limited availability on the market. And there's been a specific focus on disability. But the second point I want to make is the level of maiming that has hit Palestinian children is unprecedented. And we're going to have an enormous increase in the number of disabled children arising out of this horrendous situation. The first thing to do, frankly, is education around UXOs and mines and unexploded ordnances. The whole of the strip is littered. And I was in Gaza about 7 weeks ago, saw child after child after child with their limb amputated, their stomach cut open, damage to their brains, the human consequences of each of those individual children and their families and what they're going to have to go through. We're going to need to be there for them.
Thank you. I'll go on to the next question, which I'd like to answer. And this is actually Marwan. Perhaps you could answer it very briefly. You were talking about the casualties amongst your volunteers and your staff. And this question is really, how do you motivate your teams and how do they stay motivated?
Well, I think, as I said, what we have seen is dedication beyond, I'd say, beyond comprehension. When you have, again, our team who is in the north of Gaza, their families are in the south, they are staying. They support and they help with the medical evacuation of everybody else, and they stay. I think it's the principles that they've been educated on. It's the dedication to the humanitarian work. But quite honestly, the first and foremost is feeling with your community. I am a Palestinian. I feel every second, every ounce of me feels with my people. And it is beyond my duty to help, to be able to do something. And I think for the 2.2 million people in Gaza who are living this nightmare, this catastrophe, it is already horrible. But for the people who are working to help, I think they get some solace, they get some meaning of staying and helping those people. And I think it is self-motivated. I think it's this what motivates them. It's part of being part of the community, being there, feeling, and giving them this mission that they are helping those who are suffering.
Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to take any more questions, and thank you so much for sending them in. There are so many good questions coming in, and I'm sure after this we can continue the discussion outside in the margins, in the coffee break. It's a very complicated subject. I'm going to reduce that from complicated to simple now and go back to with my journalistic hat on and make everyone give sound bites now for us to all take away. So I'm going to start with Faris. Really, what would you like the audience to take away, please, from this discussion?
Well, the first point is that this is not a pure humanitarian crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis that has been politically engineered, and the solution is first and foremost political. That's one. Two, Gaza is not, the crisis in Gaza did not start on October 7th. We can go back all the way to 1948, but most importantly is that Gaza has been under siege for the past 17 years. So all the discussion about trucks is important, but also let's remember that Gaza used to produce and export. So it's not only about the 500 trucks, but about the empowerment of the population. And the last point is that the crisis won't end with a ceasefire. Actually, the crisis might start with once the ceasefire is there, once we see what's there on the ground. Estimates are that more than 75% of the civilian infrastructure has been already damaged. So it's not about just ceasefire and sending people back. There's a whole long, tedious process of rubble cleaning, demining, decontamination before even thinking about sending people to live next to their demolished houses, and all the process that has to be engineered. So we're in for a very long walk, even to bring Gaza to where it was before October 7th, which was not a pleasant place, where 75% of the youth wanted to leave back then. So imagine the situation at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Marwan, in 30 seconds, please.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's appropriate to recognize those who have took principled position from day one. And I think those should be followed. And here I would like to salute Belgium, Spain, and Ireland for doing that. Second, I think the roadmap, we've heard the minister's word, we've heard Mr. Borrell. I think this is the position that governments have to take seriously and move. My last very quick point is with regard to UNRWA, and I'm not a defendant, I am a defendant of UNRWA, but I have seen some donors came to us and told us, take this money, we want to give you this fund. Of course, this fund, we knew this fund was going to UNRWA. We said, no, thank you. We understand as a Palestinian that UNRWA is critical, not only to Gaza as was said, but to the whole Palestine refugees, and because UNRWA embodies the rights of the Palestine refugees. So I think some may think this is an opportunity for funding. For us, it's a red line, and we have to make it clear to donors that UNRWA cannot be substituted. Thank you.
Natalie.
Thank you, Marwan. In 30 seconds, I would say it is not true to say that the UN is inefficient in Gaza and that it's not getting its act together. The aid is there. It's right there across the border. We all said it. All we need is political will to open more crossings, get the aid in, get a ceasefire, and for us to distribute it.
Thank you.
Yeah, very briefly, we need a ceasefire. It's a prerequisite for a negotiated two-state solution. And secondly, even in time of war, we have to rebuild society, not only by getting humanitarian aid in, but also by thinking about reconstruction already. And more importantly, I think we need to broaden and strengthen the room of maneuver for civil society, for civic space inside the future state of Palestine, on the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip.
Finally, Ted.
And last, we need a ceasefire and we need access now. But as my colleagues have said, this did not start on October 7th. It was horrendous on October 7th. It's been horrendous every day since October 7th. But what is needed is a political solution that allows Palestinian and Israeli children to live in peace with each other. You need to go back to not neglecting this crisis. The notion that Israel and Arab countries could make peace and not deal with the Palestinian question needs to be a thing of the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists for your frank insights and your expertise, and hearing those very vivid and moving testimonies of what's actually happening on the ground. I think it really does serve as a reminder that something needs to be done urgently. Before we finish, I was going to do a sum up, but I won't because it was so eloquently done. However, there is one phrase that wasn't said in the sum up, and that was leave no one behind. Let's not forget that. Thank you very much to the audience, and thank you to the panelists.